This video is prepared based on official accident reports and witness testimonies. January 25, 1990. Above New York's winter storm-battered skies, a Boeing 707, with dwindling fuel attempts its final chance. Avianca Flight 52, departing from Colombia, desperately seeks landing at JFK Airport after 3 hours of delays and holding patterns. Captain Laureano Cavites commands aircraft HK 2016 with 149 passengers and 9 crew members aboard. Air traffic controllers have granted them priority, but the crucial word emergency has never been spoken. This linguistic difference will create one of aviation's most tragic communication failures. The distinction between Spanish and English aviation phraseology will cost 73 lives when this aircraft crashes into the small village of Cove Neck, Long Island. As calendar pages show 1990, this story demonstrates the critical importance of fuel management and emergency communication protocols. Through thick fog and wind shear, cultural misunderstandings meet mechanical realities in New York's busiest airspace. What begins as routine international service becomes a desperate fight against time, weather, and language barriers. This is the story of how a single word, emergency, could have prevented tragedy, and how fuel exhaustion combined with communication breakdown to create disaster above America's most populated region. Unfortunately, this night will forever change international aviation communication standards worldwide. Boeing 707-321B stands among aviation history's most legendary aircraft. Registration HK 2016. This particular machine was manufactured in June 1967, initially serving Pan American Airways before Avianca purchased it in February 1977. At the time of accident, this 22-year-old aircraft had accumulated 61,764 flight hours across countless routes. Captain Laureano Cavites commands the cockpit with exceptional credentials. 16,787 total flight hours, including 1,534 hours specifically on Boeing 707 aircraft. A Colombian Air Force Reserve pilot, Cavites maintains an unblemished safety record with no previous accidents. His experience spans both military and civilian aviation operations. First Officer Maurice Moyano assists with 1,837 flight hours of experience. Both pilots possess current FAA licenses and valid medical certificates required for international operations. However, one critical factor affects their performance. The autopilot system is completely inoperative, forcing manual flight operations throughout the entire journey. This mechanical issue means constant pilot workload from departure to arrival. Manual flying through weather, holding patterns, and complex approach procedures significantly increases crew fatigue, a factor that proves crucial as fuel dwindles and stress mounts during the developing emergency. The combination of manual flight operations and deteriorating weather creates additional challenges for an already demanding transatlantic crossing with limited reserves. January 25, 1990 morning. Flight 52 departs Bogotá's El Dorado Airport at 1:05 p.m., 5 minutes ahead of schedule on routine international service. The 149 passengers aboard represent diverse backgrounds: Colombian business travelers, families visiting relatives in America, immigrants pursuing the American dream in New York's opportunities. During this period, significant migration flows exist between Colombia and the United States, with many seeking economic opportunities and family reunification in New York's thriving Colombian community. These passengers carry hopes, dreams, and connections spanning 2 continents. The aircraft's first stop is Medellin's José María Córdoba Airport for fuel and passengers. After loading approximately 81,000 pounds of aviation fuel, the second leg to New York begins at 3:08 p.m. This fuel quantity meets standard procedures for the 2,500-mile journey, including Atlantic crossing, approach procedures, go-around capability, and mandatory alternate airport reserves. However, winter weather patterns across America's Northeast create challenging conditions. Cold fronts, wind shear, and reduced visibility generate traffic delays throughout New York's complex airspace. What begins as routine international service encounters meteorological obstacles that will test fuel planning assumptions. As Flight 52 cruises toward North America, weather forecasters track deteriorating conditions. Fog banks roll across Long Island, while wind shear warnings fill controllers' communications with increasing frequency. As Flight 52 approaches New York metropolitan area, deteriorating weather conditions create massive delays throughout the region. Air traffic control immediately places the Colombian flight into multiple holding patterns, circular flight paths that consume precious fuel while awaiting approach clearance. The first holding pattern occurs near Norfolk, Virginia, lasting 19 minutes as controllers manage traffic flow into New York's congested airspace. The Boeing 707 circles continuously at assigned altitude, engines consuming approximately 150 gallons per minute while making zero progress toward destination. Each minute represents irreplaceable fuel. A second holding pattern near Atlantic City adds 29 more minutes of fuel burn. By this point, the crew calculates remaining fuel against distance to destination, considering standard procedures requiring reserves for approaches, missed approaches, and alternate airport diversion. The final holding pattern near Kaman intersection consumes another 29 minutes of precious fuel. In total, Flight 52 spends 77 minutes in holding patterns, burning thousands of pounds of fuel that will later prove crucial for survival. Each circuit burns reserves designed for emergency scenarios. During these holds, the crew discusses fuel status internally, but never conveys urgency to air traffic control using standard emergency terminology. Their requests for priority handling lack the authority that emergency declarations carry in aviation protocol. Before continuing this investigation, please subscribe to Through the Pilot's Eyes for detailed aviation analysis. Your support helps us research these vital safety lessons. Now back to Flight 52's critical moments. At 9:02 p.m., Flight 52 finally receives approach clearance to JFK's runway 22L after nearly 3 hours of delays. The crew begins descent through challenging weather conditions that have plagued New York throughout the evening. Wind shear and reduced visibility create a hazardous approach environment. The approach proceeds normally until short final, when sudden wind shear disrupts the aircraft's flight path. Unpredictable wind changes create severe turbulence, making stable approach impossible under these conditions. At 9:23 p.m., Captain Kavaitis demonstrates professional airmanship by executing a missed approach, adding power and climbing away from dangerous conditions. This decision represents textbook aviation decision-making under extreme circumstances. However, this go-around consumes additional precious fuel and requires vectors for another approach attempt. Air traffic control clears them for second approach, unaware that fuel tanks now approach critical levels threatening survival. The crew's fuel calculations show minimal reserves remaining. Yet they never declare proper emergency status, continuing to request priority through cultural communication patterns that controllers cannot interpret properly. Following the missed approach, Flight 52's fuel situation becomes desperately critical. The crew calculates approximately 2,200 pounds remaining, barely sufficient for one approach attempt with no margin for error. Standard fuel planning requires significantly higher reserves for safety protocols. Captain Kavaitis faces an impossible decision: continue to JFK or attempt diversion to their alternate airport. Boston's Logan Airport lies 160 miles away, impossible with current fuel quantity. The crew finds themselves committed to landing at JFK on the next approach or facing catastrophic fuel exhaustion. At 9:24 p.m., First Officer Moyano transmits their clearest communication about the emergency. "We're running out of fuel." This represents their most urgent statement regarding the situation, but still lacks specific emergency terminology that controllers need to prioritize their aircraft. Air traffic controllers hear the fuel statement but fail to comprehend the immediate danger. Without the crucial word emergency, they continue normal traffic separation and approach procedures. Other aircraft receive equal priority while Flight 52's tanks approach empty. Meanwhile, the Boeing 707 flies vectors for another approach with fuel gauges showing critically low readings. Each minute consumes precious gallons, bringing them closer to complete engine failure and certain death. The second approach begins at 9:32 p.m. with critically dangerous fuel levels threatening immediate engine failure. Captain Kavaitis configures aircraft for landing while monitoring fuel flow indicators showing alarmingly low readings across all tanks. Every system requires constant fuel engines, hydraulics, electrical generation. At approximately 12 miles from touchdown, the inevitable occurs. Engines 3 and 4 flame out as fuel flow ceases entirely. The distinctive whine of jet engines spooling down fills the cockpit as power disappears on the aircraft's right side, creating asymmetric thrust conditions. "We lost 2 engines." First Officer Moyano reports to controllers with professional calm despite the desperate situation. This transmission finally conveys the emergency nature of their crisis. But precious time has been lost during fatal miscommunication. Captain Kavaitis fights to maintain control with only partial power from 2 functioning engines. The Boeing 707 continues along approach path, but without adequate thrust, maintaining altitude and airspeed becomes impossible. The aircraft transforms into a glider with concrete block aerodynamics. Controllers clear emergency equipment to stand by, but Flight 52 is beyond ground assistance. At 9:34 p.m., engines 1 and 2 fail as the last fuel is consumed. Flight 52 is now a powerless aircraft carrying 158 people toward Long Island's residential neighborhoods with gravity as the only force. With all engines failed, Flight 52 descends rapidly toward Long Island's North Shore. Captain Cavadez maintains remarkable control despite complete power loss, demonstrating exceptional airmanship under impossible circumstances. The powerless Boeing 707 approaches Cove Neck Village at approximately 220 knots in winter darkness. At 9:34 p.m., the aircraft crashes into a wooded hillside near Tennis Court Road. The impact is severe but not immediately fatal for many passengers. The aircraft breaks apart upon ground contact, with the forward fuselage section penetrating a residential property's wooden deck. Miraculously, no post-crash fire erupts despite violent impact. This crucial factor allows survival opportunities for passengers in certain sections. Local emergency responders arrive quickly, but the remote wooded location complicates rescue efforts in darkness and freezing temperatures. Of 158 people aboard Flight 52, 73 perish in the crash. The 54% survival rate proves remarkable given complete fuel exhaustion and nighttime forest impact. Passengers and crew in rear sections experience better survival chances due to impact dynamics and structural breakup patterns. Local Cove Neck residents immediately respond as first responders, providing critical assistance before professional emergency services reach the location. Their quick action under difficult conditions helps save lives among survivors scattered across the wooded crash site. The comprehensive NTSB investigation reveals a complex accident caused by multiple critical contributing factors. Primary cause is definitively identified as crew failure to adequately manage aircraft fuel load and communicate proper emergency status to air traffic control before complete fuel exhaustion occurred. However, deeper investigation analysis reveals serious systemic communication failures throughout the entire sequence of events. Critical breakdown emerges specifically in cross-cultural aviation communication protocols. The crew's repeated requests for priority handling simply don't convey true urgency in English-speaking air traffic control environment. In Spanish aviation culture, priority often clearly implies emergency status, but English-speaking controllers interpret this terminology completely differently, creating absolutely fatal misunderstanding between cultures. Investigators find that proper standardized emergency terminology exists but wasn't properly utilized during this crisis. The single word emergency would have triggered immediate priority handling and cleared all other traffic from approach paths. This precise linguistic distinction could have prevented the entire tragedy. Contributing factors include the failed autopilot system requiring exhausting manual flight operations, significantly increasing crew workload and fatigue throughout the journey. Weather conditions and extended holding patterns consumed fuel far beyond safe operational margins. Air traffic control procedures also face scrutiny for inadequate probing of crew fuel statements. The investigation concludes that while multiple factors contributed to this accident, the crew's critical failure to declare emergency status using proper terminology remains the central finding. 2 NTSB board members filed dissenting opinions arguing that air traffic control and FAA traffic management failures received insufficient attention in the final report. This disagreement reflects the complex nature of accident causation in modern aviation operations. Thank you for following this comprehensive aviation safety investigation with Through the Pilot's Eyes. Please subscribe for more detailed aviation analysis and critical safety lessons from aviation history. Avianca Flight 52's devastating legacy permanently transformed international aviation communication protocols worldwide. The FAA immediately implemented comprehensive standardized terminology for fuel emergency situations, completely eliminating dangerous ambiguity between different languages and cultural interpretations. New mandatory regulations now require air traffic controllers to actively clarify any potentially ambiguous emergency communications from international flights operating in United States airspace. Enhanced pilot training programs now emphasize proper emergency phraseology across all airlines operating international routes. The critical importance of declaring emergency rather than requesting priority is drilled into every commercial pilot's training curriculum worldwide. Cross-cultural communication workshops become mandatory for controllers working international airspace throughout the aviation industry. Fuel management procedures receive complete overhaul throughout the aviation industry. Airlines develop sophisticated fuel monitoring systems and enhanced crew resource management training specifically designed to prevent similar exhaustion scenarios. Dispatch support for international flights is dramatically enhanced to actively assist flight crews during extended weather delays and operational difficulties. Air traffic control training incorporates extensive lessons about recognizing coded distress signals, and asking proper clarifying questions when any fuel concerns are mentioned by flight crews from different cultural backgrounds. The 73 innocent people who perished on that tragic January night become eternal catalysts for global aviation safety improvements. Their deaths ensure that future generations of aviators communicate with absolute precision during emergencies. In aviation's unforgiving environment, clear language truly means the difference between life and death, making improved communication standards their lasting memorial.